Hey soldiers, as the United States spirals further and further toward insolvency, and that's exactly where we're headed, as we accelerate along that trajectory, we will see more and more actions by our government that amount to attacks on the wealth of the citizenry. And I'm going to prove that to you today. They're coming after every single solitary dime. We've got a government that is turning into a Stasi, East Germany type of makeup. We're a banana republic in many instances. Now, I love the country. I was talking to a group of friends the other day, and they were seriously considering finding other countries to relocate to. I ain't going nowhere, okay? I'm here for the duration. But I will concede that this is definitely a country that is sliding inexorably toward socialism. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about today is the fact that this government does not want you to be able to resist it. And that is a constitutional right that we have. Now, if you don't understand that,
and you ain't black.
All right, I slid that in there for a reason. And look, let's just get started talking about the fact that, let's go all the way back to feudal Japan for starters. And there were these laws back then that were called sword hunts. This resulted from some of the laws they had. Some of the daimyos back then, they didn't want people rising up and opposing them. Okay, so they went throughout the countryside and they would seize weapons. This happened several times throughout the history of Japan. And as I understand it right now, Japan does not have a Second Amendment as we know it. Let me tell you why I'm high on the Second Amendment, because we don't really have to go back to feudal Japan, where the people had their weapons seized and were subsequently treated as serfs, as, you know, just these feudal peasants. We can come right here to the United States of America, and we can look back in our history, and there are several occasions where people were disarmed or not allowed to have weapons in the first place, and just so happens, those people had their economic liberty stolen from them, okay? Now, again, you don't have to like this, but it's history. It is the history of this nation. I am what, I guess if you had to put me into some political box, it could be conservative, okay? But I'm also familiar with the fact that for all you 80s kids out there, I grew up thinking that we, the United States of America, was G.I. Joe. And, you know, we might have got that reputation out of World War II. But in fact, we're Cobra. So once you get that realization, you begin to massively distrust the government. And I do, okay? Again, I love the country, but this is a country that has lied to its own citizenry. Look at the Tuskegee experiment and what was done there. There are countless other experiments that were done to all kinds of people, injecting radioactive material into people without their knowledge, on and on and on. This under the auspices of the United States government, okay? This video is definitely not going to be seen. But I say that to illustrate that your economic liberty is attacked when you're not able to defend your number one asset against tyranny of any type, okay, no matter who it's coming from. And what that also facilitates, if you look at slavery in America, then, of course, your labor, the labor of the slaves was, taken from them. They had to work, but they could not enjoy the fruits of their labor. That was an attack on their sovereignty, economic and otherwise. Then you take a look at some of the instances that occurred with the Native Americans. They had straight up real estate appropriated from them. And there were many laws that got in the way of Native Americans owning firearms. Okay, guns. Let's just be flat out up front about it. Now, before we go any further, let's actually get into the text of the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Pretty clear. That's why you don't want them rewriting any part of the Bill of Rights today, because first of all, it wouldn't contain the Second Amendment. Second of all, the few rights that it did grant you would be just as massive as the tax code and open to all types of interpretation. This is pretty clear, being necessary to the security of a free state. Your economic freedom is rolled into that statement. Okay, so what do we have here lately? We've got the Supreme Court that came out and, they did a lot of positive things with regard to firearms and the right to bear them. And I know some people, well, if you think everybody should have a gun, then why not a nuclear weapon? Which is a dumbass argument, because it says right there in the text, the right of the people to keep and bear. I can't wear an ICBM on my back. Okay, I can't bear it. So it doesn't mean that. For all of the people who love to use that trope to intentionally misinterpret the amendment. All right, you're looking at a tyrant. This is Virginia Representative Don Beyer. Let me tell you a funny story about him. He used to be a car dealer. We actually own a car that we purchased from a Don Beyer dealership. I wish I'd known he was a tyrant those many years ago when I bought this car, because if I knew, I certainly would not have supported him in any way. And we bought that car before he ascended to the Congress. Democrat Representative Don Beyer suggests bill adding a $1,000 tax on AR-15s that would not require Republican votes. A $1,000 tax. So, see, they want to attack your right, your Second Amendment right. They want to attack that using taxation. So you see how taxation is now, they're upfront about not only weaponizing the dollar against foreign powers, but weaponizing the tax code against American citizens. Okay? And look, we talked about feudal Japan. You can talk about all types of regimes that have existed throughout human history. And when you see a regime get in between the citizens and their right to bear arms, be they swords, maces, clubs, I don't care what it is. Anytime the government gets in the way of that, then they've got plans for you. Okay, now you can do your own due diligence and historical research to find more information about that, but it's extremely evident. So this tyrant, Beyer, says, we think that a $1,000 fee on assault weapons is just the kind of restrictive measure that creates enough fiscal impact to qualify for reconciliation. Reconciliation is a mechanism whereby the Congress can pass tax and funding measures. So they want to roll this in there by using it to attack the American citizenry by taxing us on the purchase of certain types of guns. Okay. And they can call it whatever they want. An assault weapon. They can call it whatever the hell they want. All right. It doesn't make me shirk back or try to defend the nomenclature in any way, shape, or form. I know my history, and therefore I know what they're trying to do. Now, this is part and parcel. If you can remove this, and just to give you a little bit more flavor of what's going on here, they are talking about Joe Manchin would be a key, the West Virginia Democrat Senator Joe Manchin. He'd be a key, if this went to the Senate, he would be a key vote, and he has expressed some agreement with the abolishment of a certain type of weapon. Mind you, they always call the AR-15 a weapon of war, but the IRS is buying them. Now, the IRS does not wage war on foreign shores. Okay, just food for thought. Now, we talked about this in previous videos because it bears repeating. The Fed is trying their damnedest to create what's known as a central bank digital currency. We talked about just yesterday Ron Paul, and we'll link to that video later in this one, but we talked about Ron Paul kind of throwing out some cautionary advice with regard to this. These things are bad news for your economic liberty. You want to talk about having your liberty appropriated in every way, shape, or form? Well, the CBDC is the way to do it. Now, the danger here is that after every big event in American history, there has been some legislation to come along after that has chipped away at the freedoms that we as Americans are supposed to be enjoying. You go all the way back to the Great Depression, and what came out of that was the programs put in place by Roosevelt, many of which looked socialistic in their nature, okay, and we haven't gotten rid of them yet. The current economic crisis of a looming 2022 recession has brought on the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act. Buried in the text of the bill and a March 2022 executive order from Joe Biden are fine print passages about a new financial technology that the United States government will enact and pilot. It's called the central bank digital currency. So they've put some language in that bill to further this effort, okay? Last video, we talked about Carstens, the guy from the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank of central banks. This guy is so stereotypically fat cat, okay? And one of these guys that you would think of as these voracious bankers that are just devouring the liberty, economic liberty of the common man. I mean, he fits the bill. This is like straight out of central casting. It goes on, this article I'm reading from Zero Hedge goes on to say, the exact text of the order reads, quote, the order also encourages the Federal Reserve to continue its research, development, and assessment efforts for a U.S. CBDC, including development of a plan for a broader U.S. government action in support of their work. This effort prioritizes U.S. participation in multi-country experimentation. We'll go back to that in a minute. Okay, back to the quote. And ensures U.S. leadership internationally to promote CBDC development that is consistent with the United States priorities and democratic values. We don't even practice democratic values here, okay, in America. Okay, we have a 5-6-tier justice system over here. And if you got money, you can usually go off scot-free. All right, but in that quote, they are talking about not just the United States, but efforts to involve a multi-country framework. All right, so are we looking at some sort of attempt to establish a global currency through a CBDC, central bank digital currency? The Bank of International Settlements is heavily involved. Are they going to run this thing from their shop? If you're not frightened by the aforementioned verbiage that we read from the bill, you should be. If fully carried out, Chinese-style socialism could invade the thing you've worked for your whole life, your retirement savings, or your wealth in general. You might be thinking, this could never happen in the United States. The U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency. We've talked about that going away. While that line of thought may have held true for more than 60 years, the strategy is rapidly shifting in the U.S. and around the world. Right now, over 100 countries are exploring or piloting CBDCs, a digital form of a country's sovereign currency. All right, and we want to talk about the elements of control. Now, it's basically everything. Everything you do would be controlled. Every economic move you make would be able to be controlled by a CBDC. They're also talking about them becoming programmable so that you may or may not be allowed to transact if you have maybe expressed the wrong opinion. I wouldn't be able to spend any money. Keep in mind that when CBDCs are fully implemented, Bitcoin may not last very long. The U.S. government doesn't like competition, especially when it comes to the U.S. dollar. We've spent trillions of tax dollars on countless wars and conflicts just to protect the currency. Anything that can be controlled and regulated from a purchase or transaction standpoint would be at the mercy of U.S. government algorithms. Drive a gas-powered vehicle? Your digital currency account will only let you spend so much each month at a gas pump. It sounds unbelievable, but this is what's on the horizon. If it sounds fantastical to you, understand that they're already using social credit to tightly control citizens in China down to where they're able to live, where they're able to travel, and where they're able to eat. It's going on right now. The writing is on the wall already. Our government wants to control every aspect of the currency, including how and where your savings and investments reside. Instead of controlling your own hard-earned money, your savings and investments could be forced into a voucher system, similar to receiving food stamps or some sort of government welfare check. Kind of like, they kind of tested it out during the stimulus. You would be allowed a little bit per month and only allowed to spend it on certain approved purchases. I bet you ammunition wouldn't be one of them. All right, guys, so just food for thought. You need to understand this because it needs to inform the way you cast your votes, all right? You need to know that there are tyrants out there in these halls of bureaucracy and in these legislative halls, be they your county council, your state legislature, and we know Congress, okay? So if you see this video, go ahead and share it because I don't think it's going to get a lot of play, algorithmically speaking. I want you to watch this video. This is kind of a companion piece to the video you just watched. It talks about Ron Paul's view of this and some other important aspects of the establishment of the CBDC in relation to your economic liberty. Take a look, guys. I'll talk to you soon.